Dear colleagues, professors, and researchers, after nearly 3 years of COVID-19, the world is now transitioning to a more normalized situation, similar to what it was before COVID-19. I hope that everyone who attended this conference was able to get through it. The transitions in state systems in East European and the Balkans that marked the end of the Cold War in the early 1990s signaled the dawn of a new era, but unfortunately, more recently, more precisely from February 2022 until now, the world has been worried that we are entering a new Cold War. I believe that the outcome of the new Cold War will not only affect Northeast Asia, including South Korea and Eastern and Balkan Europe, but also the entire world. I think this is a topic that we should all be paying attention to, both at this conference and in future research. I hope that this international conference will have meaningful presentations and discussions, and I wish you all the best for your academic development. Thank you very much.
Honorable scholars and their members and guests, on the occasion of the International Conference 2023, co-hosted by East European and Balkan Institute and the Korean Association of Central and Eastern European Studies, I stand before you today as the chairperson of the association to extend my warmest congratulations. The theme of this conference, Unity in Diversity, condenses the sense of Eastern Europe, a region marked by its unique blend of histories, languages, traditions, and perspectives. Despite the historical, political, and geographical complexities, Eastern Europe stands as a testament to the remarkable ability of diverse society to find common ground, build bridges of understanding, and foster unity. In this ever-changing global landscape, where the need for harmony and cooperation has never been more apparent, the experiences and lessons from Eastern Europe provide invaluable insights for our collective future. Through this conference, we have the privilege to explore a multitude of topics encompassing the fields of politics, economics, sociology, history, and culture, among others. We have the opportunity to engage in vibrant discussions and exchange knowledge, all with the ultimate goal of deepening our understanding of Eastern Europe and its role in our interconnected world. On behalf of the Korean Association of Central and East European Studies, I would like to express my deep gratitude to all the organizers and participants who have dedicated their time and energy to make this conference another big success. Your dedication and passion for the study of Eastern Europe serve as an inspiration to us all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Alina Shymanska. I am the PhD candidate from Seoul National University, Department of Political Science and International Relations. And today I would like to present you my small research paper, which is titled Structural Position of Ukraine between NATO and Russia, Its Change since Full-Scale Russia's Invasion in Ukraine. So to begin with, I would like to elaborate more about the structural position. To talk about structural position, we should mention international network, which is derived from the network theory in international relations. So, network theory in international relations was built around the tenets of social network theory and later applied to the study of international relations. And actually, it doesn't emphasize on the features of each individual country or another non-governmental player in the network, like the theory of realism does. But this network theory mainly emphasizes on the links, on the connection between the actors. So here, when talking about the international network, we are mainly talking about the actors and how do they relate to each other, how do they connect. Not about how many material power, how much material power they possess. To say once more, we do not talk about how economically strong or how military powerful are the actors, but we are mostly talking about what kind of connections do they make between each other. So among many examples of using of international relations network theory is the example of research conducted by Kim Hyun-min, who used network analysis to demonstrate the structural position and the relational power of South Korea in the Asian arms sales network. Unlike Kim Hyun-min, I do not conduct any quantitative explanation, any quantitative analysis in my recent research, but I try to elaborate more descriptively using the terms of network theory, such as actors and structural position. And here, by doing so, I try to explain what was Ukraine's position between NATO and Russia, to say once more, in the NATO-Ukraine-Russia network. So, was Ukraine closer to NATO? Was Ukraine closer to Russia since independence? How did it change its position? Why did it change the position? And what kind of defense strategies did Ukraine use since independence to confront Russia, or not to confront, but rather to deter Russia's threat towards Ukraine since independence that Ukraine gained in 1991. So to do so, I will first present the existing theoretical knowledge about the defense strategies of small states, and then we will discuss about some historical examples of how Ukraine used those defense strategies to deter the Russian aggression, and how Ukraine positioned itself in the NATO-Ukraine-Russia network with the use of those strategies. So to begin with, let's talk about the defense strategies of small power. So here I use the term of small power not in terms that Ukraine is actually a weak state. I do not mean this in any way. Actually, in nowadays political science, there are many authors who depict Ukraine as middle power or as regional power in Eastern Europe. But in the matter of my research, it doesn't really matter, because I do not try to focus on categorizing Ukraine as some kind of small power or middle power. What I'm trying to do here is to depict the defense strategies that Ukraine used in order to deter itself from the possible Russian aggression. But why do I use the term small power here? Here I use the term small power because when we are talking about defense strategies, we in many ways cannot avoid the term of military alliance and the alliance theory. And in alliance theory, we usually talk about the structure that is highly asymmetrical, because when we are talking about alliance, people mostly mention the great power that is giving its protection to a power which is smaller. For example, in NATO, there are many countries such as the United States, Canada, France, Italy, and some smaller ones like Estonia and Iceland, and so on and so forth. At the same time, why France is not indeed a small power, but since it receives some kind of security protection from the United States in the framework of NATO, we would sometimes say that France is depicted as small power compared to the United States because it receives those security guarantees from the United States. Yes. So, following this logic of alliance theory, which divides all the countries in the military alliance on great power, which is security provider, and small powers, which are security guarantees receivers. Here we talk about Ukraine as a small power, and for this reason we rely on the theory of defense strategies of small powers. So, yes. So what are the defense strategies of small powers? Well, when small power is feeling some kind of security threat and is actually under the security dilemma, it may select two kinds of options. The first one is entering the military alliance with a greater power that will protect this country, the small power, from the threat. Another option is becoming non-aligned or neutral country. So the non-aligned country and neutral country do not necessarily mean the same, but sometimes in international relations those are used interchangeably. Here, when talking about Ukraine, I am trying to apply this non-aligned theory because as far as we know, despite Ukraine is trying to achieve those security guarantees from NATO, especially under the heavy security threat from Russia. Right now, Ukraine is not the NATO member, so we cannot say that Ukraine has ever been a part of any security alliance since independence. That's why we should talk from the point of view of non-alignment theory about the way of how Ukraine is trying to cope with security threats from Russia. This non-alignment theory and the security strategies of small power under the non-alignment regime are usually developed. They were mostly developed by scholars from the Northern European region because, as we know, Northern Europe has a very long history of non-alignment and neutrality. So the first scholar whom I would like to present is Ole Elkstrom, and he divides the small states non-alignment strategies into balancing, distancing, hiding, courting, and appeasement. When we are talking about balancing by Ole Elkstrom's definition, it mostly the way when a small power, the actor is trying to equally distance himself from all the great power countries, equally those that are threatening the country and those friendly great powers who would like to protect the country. So in terms of Ukraine, Russia, NATO network, it would be like Ukraine being in the middle of the network, not close to Russia, not close to NATO, but just by itself. Another theory would be, another strategy would be distancing and hiding. I would talk about them together because they are pretty much similar, while having a small nuance of difference. So distancing and hiding mean when country is trying to avoid in some way those threatening great powers and friendly great powers, with the only difference that distancing is kind of very active when the country, the actor, is actively avoiding, and hiding is a more like passive category. There is also a strategy of courting. So by courting, the actor is trying to allure those friendly powers and to make them protect the actor in case of aggression from the threatening nation. But the point of courting is that actually, when the courting is performed, it doesn't mean that the country is entering some kind of security alliance and is getting some kind of official assistance, but only cooperates with those friendly powers unofficially, like staying outside of the alliance. For example, let us talk about the NATO-Ukraine Charter, or the NATO's project of partnership for peace, where NATO is actively cooperating with some NATO non-member states, with some outside of the alliance partners, by providing them some kind of military training, some kind of knowledge about the military strategies, while not giving them security guarantees in case of those countries being under attack. And another one, the last one, is appeasement, when the country that is under the security dilemma is made, is kind of made to make friendly relations with a threatening nation. So, for example, let us make an example of Belarus, which is trying to appease Russia in any way and to even collaborate with Russia on some points, such as on the point of Russia-Ukraine war, in order to not become the victim by itself. So here we talked about some points of how non-aligned countries use their security strategies and what kind of those strategies are. And now I would like also to talk about how and why the countries select the strategies, and do they change them over time or not. So of course they do, and Håkan Edström and Jacob Westberg, who are also the Northern European scholars, they made a research about Finland, Sweden, Norway and Denmark, so the Northern European states, both aligned and not aligned. And they made a conclusion that when countries choose between entering the alliance or staying non-aligned, they mostly made those decisions based on their historical experience of being involved in the Great Power War. So, for example, Finland, after the Winter War, decided to stay unaligned because it saw being non-aligned. Finland saw being non-aligned as the only possible way to avoid the future collisions and the future military conflicts with Russia. So this is how the historical experience of Winter War, which was the Great Power War for Finland, actually influenced Finland staying outside of NATO for 80 years and becoming a neutral state for the 80 years during the 20th century until now. So historical experience matters. But also there is a part of present that can make countries change their security strategies. And this part of present is called strategic shock. Strategic shock is some kind of a very dynamic event. Sometimes we can say, we can call it X event, which happens all of a sudden and is very hard to predict. And when this event happens, it threatens the security atmosphere so heavily that the country unfortunately has to change its security strategy in order to avoid the other possibilities for the other strategic shocks. So, for example, let us make an example of 9/11, which became the strategic shock for the United States and made the United States start the global war on terrorism. There are also another strategic shocks that can not actually relate to the country that is about to change its strategy, and is sometimes related to the country's neighbor or some other actor that is located outside of the region. However, the country that is about to change its strategy due to the strategic shock actually does so because it perceives this strategic shock very threatening towards itself. So that's why strategic shock is of such a high importance. Okay, so now I will move on to Ukraine defense strategies in view of its structural position between NATO and Russia. We would start from the government of Leonid Kravchuk, who was the president of Ukraine since 1991 to 1994. And Kravchuk actually was pretty much pro-Western. He tried to make Ukraine closer to the West. He was the first president who started and initiated the NATO-Ukraine dialogue. And actually, it was thanks to Kravchuk that Ukraine became the first ever country, the partner of NATO's Partnership for Peace. So it shows how actually Kravchuk was very proactively pro-Western and tried to make Ukraine cooperate with NATO at all costs. There are even some evidences that actually during the United States, Russia, and Ukraine negotiations over Ukraine's denuclearization, Kravchuk tried to persuade Clinton administration to accept Ukraine to NATO, or at least to provide Ukraine some kind of security guarantees from the United States in case that Ukraine would be under the attack from Russia, because Russia was actually claiming the Crimea Peninsula since the early 1990s. However, the historical evidences show that the Clinton administration was not ready to antagonize Russia with letting Ukraine become the NATO member, and was not going to give Ukraine those kind of bilateral security alliance guarantees. And that's why, unfortunately, Kravchuk did not made it possible for Ukraine to obtain those guarantees. Also, Kravchuk was very actively involved into trying to make Ukraine economically autonomous from Russia by trying to adopt his national economic policy for Ukraine in early 90s. But unfortunately, since at that time Ukraine was very interconnected to Russia's economy, it was not impossible. It was pretty much impossible, and that's why Kravchuk didn't receive much support from his fellow politicians, and after the actual fail of his principles of economic policy, he unfortunately faced the resignation. This failure of Kravchuk of getting closer to the West, while also the failure of his economic policy, made his successor Leonid Kuchma, who became the president of Ukraine from the term of 1994 to 2005, it motivated Kuchma to conduct a more appeasing strategy towards Russia. So it means that Kuchma was a little bit more pro-Russian than Kravchuk. He was not fully pro-Russian, but he was pretty much more appeasing. So, for example, during his campaign, Kuchma claimed that Ukraine must not play the role of the political intermediary between the countries of Europe and Russia, but the role of leading and integrated element of the center of Eurasian region. We know that Eurasia is a fully pro-Russian idea expressed by many Russian authors and Russian political scientists, and it was created in order to justify the necessity of Russia to become great power and the aggressive regional player, right? So by saying that Ukraine should have become the center of that Eurasian region, Kuchma actually was showing the signs that he was in some way pro-Russian. He was trying to put Ukraine structurally closer to Russia than to NATO, right? However, it doesn't mean that Kuchma fully gave up on Kravchuk's strategy of courting. For example, it was Kuchma who signed the NATO-Ukraine Charter in May 1997, just a few days before signing the Russian-Ukrainian Friendship Treaty. So Kuchma actually didn't attempt to make Ukraine a NATO member, but he left those opportunities for his successors, for other presidents of Ukraine, by signing the NATO-Ukraine Charter. And that's why we should say that Kuchma also used the strategy of courting towards NATO by keeping those unofficial ties. The next administration was the administration of President Yushchenko from 2005 to 2010, and Yushchenko was very eager to make Ukraine the NATO member. However, at the same time, unfortunately, he was under a very big under the controlling hands of Russia. So, for example, Stephen Pfeiffer, who worked as the United States ambassador in Kyiv, actually mentions the event of how in 2005 the Yushchenko administration tried to talk with NATO about the NATO membership action plan for Ukraine. And Pfeiffer mentions that at that time it was fully possible for Ukraine to obtain those membership action plan. However, all of a sudden Yushchenko actually appointed Viktor Yanukovych, who was highly pro-Russian, instead of Yulia Tymoshenko as a prime minister of Ukraine in August 2005. And that's why, due to Yanukovych, who became the new prime minister and expressed fully pro-Russian views, due to him, as Pfeiffer mentions, Ukraine could not actually obtain NATO membership action plan. So even despite Ukraine actually was pursuing entering to NATO, or at least cooperating with NATO more closely, we can see how Russia tried to prevent it by putting pressure on Yushchenko. After the strategy of Yushchenko failed, Yanukovych became the president. He held his presidency from 2010 until 2014, and at that time, actually, the first thing that he did since being appointed the president was visiting the NATO headquarters in Brussels and claiming that Ukraine was no more interested in NATO, and then Ukraine will never attempt entering NATO again. So it was a fully appeasing strategy towards Russia, and that was just giving up any relations between Ukraine and NATO, and that was weakening this Ukraine-NATO linkage in the Ukraine-NATO-Russia network. And however, we know that after the Revolution of Dignity, Yanukovych left Ukraine, and soon the great strategic shock happened. The strategic shock was Crimea Peninsula annexation by Russia and the start of the so-called Ukrainian crisis, which is Russia's hybrid strategy of fueling the pro-Russian separatist movement in Ukraine's Donbass. And this strategic shock actually influenced Ukraine pretty much. After this shock, the President Poroshenko had to adopt the provision to Ukraine's constitution that talks about the necessity of Ukraine entering NATO and the ultimate goal of Ukraine as becoming a NATO member. It means that after the strategic shock, the ties between Ukraine and Russia very weakened, and the link between Ukraine and Russia got really, really weak. It wasn't cut at that moment, but it was pretty much weak. And Ukraine was trying to get as close to NATO as it could. However, unfortunately, as we can see, those previous governments' mistakes in terms of countering the Russia's influence on Ukraine and those kind of inconsistencies in Ukraine government strategies towards NATO actually played a very sad story. For this reason, when Ukraine tried to apply for membership action plan again, NATO was not really happy, and during Poroshenko administration, we could not see any progress in membership action plan of NATO for Ukraine. However, when President Zelensky started his term, he also promised to receive membership action plan for Ukraine and accelerate Ukraine's entering NATO at any cost. However, even before he started doing so, unfortunately, Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine began in February 2022, last year. What kind of conclusions we can make from this? Well, after the beginning of the full-scale aggression, actually Ukraine was pushed towards NATO as far as it could be pushed, and we know that Ukraine terminated the work of the Russian embassy in Kyiv. So there is no more diplomatic linkage, official diplomatic linkage between Ukraine and Russia anymore, and the diplomatic mission of Russia in Ukraine is fully terminated. So, which means that the diplomatic relations between the two countries is no more working. Right. So to put it another way, it means that in NATO-Ukraine-Russia network, the linkage between Ukraine and Russia is fully cut. It's no longer weak, it's no longer existing, it's just not there. So Ukraine in this network, it's only NATO and Ukraine that actually have linkage. And also NATO has a linkage to Russia. But Russia and Ukraine are no more interlinked. So actually, some scholars may say that it was Ukraine's desire to get closer to NATO that provoked Russia to make this kind of ultimate step of starting the full-scale aggression. However, the most of scholars in international relations conclude that actually it was Russia who constantly put the pressure on Ukraine that was weakening the Russian-Ukraine linkage. And for this reason, while the Russian-Ukraine linkage was weakening, Ukraine was trying to find the protection from the NATO side, and the Ukraine NATO's linkage was getting kind of stronger and stronger. But it's not that after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, it's not that just Ukraine's position became ultimately close to NATO, and it's not that just Ukraine-Russian linkage cut off. No, it's also a big change in the geopolitical situation in the Central Eastern Europe overall. For example, we know that after this strategic shock, all the countries bordering with Russia, such as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, become the most active contributors to Ukraine's defense infrastructure when we are talking about their GDPs, right? So it means that while these countries do not have much economic power to put more money than the United States, they still put pretty much big part of finance in terms of their respective GDPs, right? So, for example, if the United States contributes to Ukraine defense infrastructure just 0.5% of its GDP, Estonia gives 1% of its GDP to Ukraine defense infrastructure. So it's a very big part of the economy that they try to contribute in order to help Ukraine fight Russia. And which means that not only Ukraine changed changed its structural position in NATO-Ukraine-Russia network since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, but most countries bordering with Russia did. I mean, those that are located on the west border with Russia. And we also know that Finland even entered NATO in April 2023, which is the ultimate change in Finland's security strategy. And we know that Poland, who started the Three Seas Initiative project in middle of 2010s, is now pushing this geopolitical agenda of strengthening forces and of creating a kind of security regionalism in order to counter the Russian threat in Central Eastern Europe. And the Three Seas Initiative project is now being financed by the United States, and it was Poland who urged the United States to contribute more defense and more military support to the Central Eastern Europe in the framework of the Three Seas Initiative. So while the Three Seas Initiative is a pretty big framework consisting of 15 or 16 countries of the former Warsaw Pact, it means that a big chunk of Europe right now got very anti-Russian and very pro-United States. So we must conclude that it wasn't that Ukraine provoked Russia, but it rather that Russia's action pushed Ukraine and other countries located in the Central Eastern Europe more towards the direction of getting closer to the United States and to cooperating closer within NATO and with NATO. So this paper was trying to explain the structural position of Ukraine after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and it also gives some kind of implications about the Central Eastern European countries. And thank you for your attention. Bye.
Good day, dear friends and colleagues. I am Natalya, and the topic of my presentation is Information Struggle of Graphic Designers in Ukraine. Today, Ukraine is united as never before, and Chul site is a single integral organism. Almost everyone is contributing to the struggle and bringing our victory closer. Visual communications specialists, illustrators, and graphic designers play a special role in this. They create visual content that performs several functions. Unites and motivates Ukrainians, documenting the daily events of the war with imaginative works, informing the world that the war in Ukraine is ongoing and is causing many casualties and destruction. The latter function is extremely important, as in today's information-saturated space, people's attention quickly switches to the news stories and previously received information is forgotten. Therefore, in order to overcome the total threat of global democracy, the world must not only know that Ukraine is suffering from armed aggression, but also receive constant reminders of this. Graphic designers and illustrators understand it and demonstrate a high level of social responsibility as initiative. Every day, social media is filled with visual content about the war in Ukraine. It is free to share and use in publications. Many authors organize various events to communicate with our foreign friends and explain to the general public what is really happening on our land. Designers Mykola Kovalenko and Nikita Titov implement the concept of one day, one poster. They create emotionally deep projects that are instantly shared by readers of social media. Their works are exhibited in Ukraine and abroad. The works are also distributed in virtual exhibitions or at international poster competitions. Each poster by Nikita Titov garners several thousand positive likes and shares in one day. The founders of the Pictoric Club of Ukrainian Illustrations, Oleg Rishenko and Olena Staranchuk, organized a series of powerful events in Germany, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Italy, Lithuania, and France. These included street exhibitions, expositions at the world's largest book fairs, and public presentations. With the support of their German partners, they published a book of illustrations called Pictures of War. The fourth block, International Triennial based in Kharkiv, has been specializing in collecting and periodically publishing posters on environmental and social issues for 30 years. Its leaders are also quite actively involved in Ukrainians' international visual communication. In 2022, the fourth block exhibitions were mostly concentrated in the United States of America, Washington, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Boston. Exhibition locations are mostly cultural centers and educational centers, for example, Suffolk University. In 2023, exhibitions were held at the Ghent University, Belgium, and the main library of Sierotsky Powiat, Poland. The Port Agency team is focused on communication in street space. The main communication vector of this agency is the creation of murals on the building of foreign cities. Under the organizational supervision of art historian Katya Taylor, a team of Ukrainian artists is implementing the Wall project, whose visuals change in each city. The murals were created and solemnly presented in Vienna, Berlin, Marseille, Brussels, Nairobi, and Liverpool. The main task of the murals is to create presentation of Ukraine through visual means. The subject matter of the works does not focus exclusively on the war, but rather on the cultural and creative power of Ukraine as a full-fledged democratic European state. This event is a result of personal activity and social responsible initiative of Ukrainian designers and their international partners. Their activities are an effective guide for students studying at universities. However, the most active universities stand on a par with professional associations and make an equally powerful contribution to the communication strategy of constantly informing the Welsh community about the tragic events in Ukraine. Students and teachers of the graphic design department of the Kyiv National University of Culture and Arts are actively working in this direction. On March 3, 2022, was created the Creative Resistance Community, which included students, graduates, and teachers. In 2022, students' works successfully participated in international festivals and design competitions in support of Ukraine. Pharma in Madrid, Plaster 14 in Torun, Panorama in Kharkiv. To date, the Department of Graphic Design of Kyiv National University of Culture and Arts has organized more than 40 exhibitions in Ukraine, Kyiv, Uzhhorod, Odessa, Khmelnytsky, and abroad in Poland, Bulgaria, the United States, Australia, the Netherlands, Lithuania, the Czech Republic. It is worth saying that it is quite difficult for students and teachers to work and study. Taking the example of our Faculty of Design and Advertising, we can say that at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, many students were under fire and in the temporarily occupied territories. About 33% of the students were forced to temporarily go abroad. They are currently in Poland, France, Germany, Canada, Spain, Hungary, and Slovakia, where they are now. The extreme conditions interfere with the calm learning process, but we are actively continuing our project. In 2023, the Museum of Kiev History hosted a presentation of 2 episodes of the documentary series Artists in a Country at War, produced by Docknod Films and Babylon 13. This movie is dedicated to the members of the creative resistance community. On March 3, 2023, on the anniversary of the community's creation, took place a presentation of the catalogue 365, Chronology of Creative Resistance of Graphic Designers, Our University. It features 365 graphic design projects that reveal wartime events in the country. This catalogue is sent to foreign partners. With those help, the exhibition has already been held in Georgia and Japan. We can distinguish 4 areas of communication in the posters we created: keeping a diary of the war, declaring Russia's status as a terrorist country, presenting Ukraine as a country with a powerful history, culture, and science, and forecasting development and partnerships after our victory. Today, we are sincerely happy to have the opportunity to present our work in South Korea. This is the beginning to remote communication with our Korean friends about Ukraine and our partnership in our common area. We thank the organizers of the conference, and we thank Professor Sogu Hong for his initiative to holding the exhibitions and facilitate this. Thank you for attention. Glory for Ukraine.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Iryna Zbyr. I am an associate professor of the Department of Ukrainian Applied Linguistics, Ivan Franko National University of Lviv. Today, I would like to present my topic, bilingualism in Ukraine and problems of national identity. The national identity of Ukrainians is closely related to the language issue. In combination with the problem of bilingualism in Ukraine, this topic becomes especially relevant in public discourse during the Russian-Ukrainian war, since, according to researchers, this is one of its causes. Self-identification as a representative of one of the parties to the conflict becomes important, which becomes the basis for determination certain worldview features of each person who is forcibly or consciously involved to the events. Language becomes an important factor in determining identity because it was and remains a component of national character, language, name, state, and national identity. Mass Ukrainian-Russian bilingualism has actually been a leading feature of the linguistic situation of Ukraine for a long time, despite the fact that according to the only population census since independence in 2001, the vast majority of its population is ethnic Ukrainians, almost 80%, while ethnic Russian only about 17%. The post-colonial nature of the society has caused the fact that there is no unambiguous correspondence between the ethnic and linguistic self-identification of citizens, and the linguistic self-identification and linguistic habits are shared to the side of the Russian language. For the establishment of statehood, the concept of the political nation of its great importance corresponding to the understanding of the nation as a state that unites citizens regardless of ethnic origin. In Ukraine, the basis of the formation of the political nation is ethnic Ukrainian, and the Ukrainian language is by the law the only state language which is recorded in the Constitution of Ukraine and the law of Ukraine on ensuring the function of Ukrainian language as a state language. In this connection, the interpretation of the adjective national, which is component of many social science terms, becomes a great important. The analysis of the dictionary article confirms that this adjective is related to two nouns, nation and nationality, and accordingly can characterize phenomena as the anthropologies in their relation to the state, national incomes, or to the certain ethnic group, national customer, national minority, or have a double conjunction and accordingly are used in two meanings. Another element of closely related to the issue of identity is the definition of concept native language, mother tongue, first language, and features of self-identification according to this term. In the Ukrainian language, the most common term is native language, which is explained in the Linguistic Encyclopedia. Citation: native language is a language with which a person individual joins the universal human values in their national originality. The end of citation. The definition emphasizes that it is functionally the first language associated with national identity. In the English language, mother tongue and native language correspond to this term, the interpretation of which are quite close to each other. The mother tongue is literally just that, the language of the mother, and is based on the reasonable view that a child finds significant other in the mother. The political discussions surround the concept of mother tongue and the awakening of national self-awareness among many Ukrainians, especially after the Revolution of Dignity in 2014, have led to the fact that modern Ukrainians attach different meaning to it. This was clearly evident during the focus group discussions that preceded the 2017 survey and was recorded in the result of the survey itself. In particular, the survey coordinator Lisnic states, citation, the study also showed that among the components of self-definition, the concept of native language option, the language of my country, occupies the same place as the language of my everyday communication, 37% it. End of citation. The terms native speakers, first language, home language, language of my home communication, and the dominant language are also widely used, the language where the person uses the most active. For the interpretation of these terms, it does not matter the language is being talked about white shade or not, one that had state official status or not. Only in Soviet time, the following it, modern Russian scientific tradition, an explanation is made for one language, Russian. So in addition to the three generally accepted meaning of the term native language, mother tongue, ethnic language, functionally first language, one more is given. Citation: that's what national language is, for example, the language of any people inhabiting the Russian Federation except Russian. The end of citation. In this sense, it's used to distinguish between type of educational institution, teaching in the Russian language and teaching in the native national language. The distinction is based on the different functional status of Russian and other languages. That's in fact the mother tongue, national language, the Russian language is amplified in opposition. This is not only emphasizes the special status of the Russian language compared to others, but also create the basis for further manipulation of this concept, in particular by asserting the right of primarily Russian speakers regarded to their ethnically to use the Russian language as their mother tongue. Therefore, the current language situation in Ukraine is a direct consequence of the previous imperial language policy, which of course should be taken into account during its analysis and language planning. All terms characterizes the connection between a person and his language are primarily oriented towards the individual in his relation to the language or languages. Weinreich defined the concept of bilingualism in the middle of the 20th century precisely with a focus on the special person. Later, it began to be used to denote both an individual and a collective trait, understanding under individual bilingualism a property of the individual that is manifested in his communication with monolingual and bilingualism. And under society, the coexistence in society of two or more languages with used by individuals or group, while not necessarily all members of society should be bilingual. At the theoretical level, the distinction between individual, collective, and state bilingualism does not cause contradiction, but in Ukraine relation, accidental or deliberate confusion of the individual or collective barrier of the signed criteria, confidence for false conclusions, or deliberate manipulation of the language issue. The language preferences of Ukrainian citizens depend on the region. When we compare situation in native Ukrainian and Russian languages of representatives of different nationalities, the result will be strange. First of all, attention is drawn to the most 100% coincidence of the linguistic and national identity of Russian in all regions, in particular Zakarpattia Oblast, where despite the national diversity, Ukrainians make up more than 80% of the population and Russian only 2.5%. As for Ukrainians, almost 100% call the Ukrainian language their native language only in Zakarpattia Oblast, while in Odessa, their number exists 60%, only 72%, and in Luhansk, there are almost 60% of Ukrainians are Ukrainians, only about 50%. Now we can mention the peculiarities of linguistic interaction in the active phase of the Russian-Ukrainian War. In May 2022, employees of the Institute of the Ukrainian Language of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine conducted an online survey of internally displaced persons and permanent residents in the region that hosts them. Of course, this survey is not statistically reliable, but it gives an idea of certain processes and patterns. In total, we have 257 questionnaires of internally displaced persons and 757 questionnaires of local residents. A preliminary analysis shows that 44% of the evacuates from settlements, the majority of the population spoken mostly Russian, 71% Ukrainian and Russian, about 70% Surzhyk, and only about 8% mainly Ukrainian. On the other hand, in the settlements where they found themselves now, 57% of the respondents note the majority of the population speak Ukrainian, according to the immigrants' assessment, 21% Ukrainian and Russian, 11% Surzhyk, and only about 10% Russian. It's interesting that immigrants assisted the language situation in the settlements. They are received as somewhat more Ukrainian speaking than the local residents themselves. Despite the fact that the immigrants came mainly from the regions where the Ukrainian language is not dominant. More than 45% of immigrants began to communicate more often in Ukrainian, and 44% changed their understanding of what their native language is. Of course, the result of the survey require a deeper understanding and first of all a comparison of the reasons of internally displaced person who left from different regions and have a different language history, but even a cursory analysis show a significant shift in the language consciousness of many of them and willingness of change their own language habit. The concept of the political nation which unites citizens regardless of ethnic origin is a great important of strengthening statehood. The majority of the population of Ukraine is ethnic Ukrainian, so it's natural they are the based on the formation of the political nation, and Ukrainian is only state language. At the same time, the post-colonial character of the society caused the fact that there is no clear correspondence between the ethnic and linguistic self-identification of citizens and the linguistic self-identification, linguistic habit and skills were pushed arise the Russian language for a long time. This general regulatory has quite pronounced regional features recorded in the materials of population censuses in the result of sociological surveys and so on. And their analysis make it possible to understand the reason for the existence of language situation that developed in Ukraine in the first 20 years of 21st century. It's with the shift and its reason in mind that further language policy in the state should be formed. The beginning of active phase of the Russian-Ukrainian war faced the movement of the large masses of the population, in particular from regions their communication in the Russian language privilege to regions with the prominence of Ukrainian. This greatly violates the established patterns of distribution of the functional territorial lot of languages in society and may all the researches carried out so far a product of history with the help of which you can understand how and why it's happened, but it's difficult to predict what will happen. Thank you for your attention.
Our issue is about multiculturalism and the regional dimension of Romania's European integration. A case study of region of Romania, called as Bukovina, in fact is north part of Moldavia. We are from the University of Ștefan cel Mare. My name is Viorel Chiriță as Associate Professor, PhD, and Daniela Matei, Senior Researcher, also PhD, at Romanian Academy Iași branches. From our point of view, multicultural communities are characterized by the peaceful coexistence of population, speaking distinct language, having different tradition, religious beliefs and value system, not to mention a different education and lifestyle and often distinct citizenship, although they live in the same country. So, along the history, this area, as a case study of Bukovina from Romania, is one example of this situation of different community which lives in the same territory. From the dimension of citizenship, that means legal one, social dimension, cultural dimension, economic one, is due to a special integration in this territory, in this area, different population coming from along the history from different parts of Europe. International migration is one of the oldest social phenomena. It has an external character in that migrants take place from one country to another. For example, we have here a map of the main trail of people who migrated along the Romanian territory between the 5th century to 10th century. But our issue is almost linked to the period from the end of 18th century to that 21st century. We will see that this territory, we want to highlight it from this point of view, multiculturalist communities, polarized population from the central part of Europe, but also generated in the modern era a sort of immigrant fluxes to Western Europe. Most of the researchers agree that in addition to fertility and mortality, spatial mobility of migrants is the third determining population evolution. But also we have to say that territorial mobility of population generated a different structure and movement in the structure of local population, and also to the population to the area, from the area in destination. From the historical perspective, the experience of face-to-face meeting with another culture, another way of living, has originated in the necessity of securing and stable and a safe population in the dominated territories. This is highlighted here in the text in red because during the administration of Austro-Hungarian in Bukovina, the administration brings here in Bukovina population from Germany, from Poland, from Slovakia, also from Hungarian, just because they are specialists also for exploitation of the mineral resources and forest, but also was a safe population from the point of view of this administration. Nowadays, the phenomenon occurs in a reverse mode as metropolized, located in states with a strong socioeconomic influence are assaulted by population coming from former colonies. So the phenomena is reverse considering the multicultural community behavior. The phenomenon is also known as multiculturalism in terms of policy promoting ethnic and cultural differences of a country or a region. The dynamic of migration is a clearer source of multiculturalism, because we may see on this map very interesting, in fact, in the upper part of the slide, the position of Romania surrounded by empire in between the world wars and also in the end of 19th century. That means our territory was influences in structure, ethnic structure, by this pressure along from the west part of Europe, from the southeast part of Europe, but also from Russia. It's just crossroads of the interest, economic interest, especially in Bukovina. Our issue particularize an effect of the circulation, territorial mobility, which derives from the coexistence of population that speak different languages, as we said. We'll present such a region of Romania, a model of ethnic and religious tolerance, a prototype of Europe, Bukovina, nicknamed Switzerland of the East, or Europe in miniature. Multiculturalism has given this space and different economic and especially cultural destiny, Bukovina being today a tourist, logistic, and transition destination area. So, other maps from the geographical point of view, for example, we consider and is considered Bukovina as part of Central Europe. Even if currently we spoke, and many people spoke about Romania in the east part of Europe, in fact, Romania in the central part of Europe, surrounded by Slavs, it's an isle of Latin people, surrounded by Hungarian, Ugro-Finnic population is coming here and established here in the first part of our era. And Romanians inhabitant in 1885 also comprised territory from other part of territorial Romanian territory, and also it was in Transylvania enclaves of German and Hungarian people in the east part of this area. In the north of Moldavia, Bukovina seems to be also a territory with many others population, ethnical population. For example, this map by drawing by Edward Fischer in the end of 19th century comprise all the Bukovina. In fact, Bukovina is just one of the territory now belongs to Suceava County in the north part of Romania, because in 1940 the north part of Bukovina was taken by Soviet Union as ultimatum. Suceava County, Bukovina, historical limit and colony settlement established during Austrian Empire, 1970-75, 1980, province of Romania, historical Romania. It was just this part now belongs to Romania. The ethnical structure, especially in the central part of Bukovina, was diverse and different from the Romanian backgrounds in the western part and eastern part of Bukovina. Why Bukovina? Why we consider this case study interesting from this multiculturalism community example? The image created by Emmanuel de Marton, famous French geographer who studied Romania in 1920, that his affirmation as Romania had and has a Central European position. Romania is in a communicational crossroads, at the crossroads of interest and desire for acquisition, resources, population, and so on. Before 1775, province of Bukovina was refuge for Romania from Transylvania. Interesting, this one, because the status of Transylvania is not very favorable for population, Romanian population, and especially after 1778, many Romanians from Transylvania immigrated in Moldavia. But after 1775, after occupation of Austro-Hungarian Empire, Bukovina became an area of European immigration because natural condition is similar to Central European ones, but also because resources of this province was very interested for people, for Austro-Hungarian administration. Of course, after the war between Turks, Ottomans, Russians, Empire, and Austro-Hungarian Empire, they splitted Europe in economic influences area and colonies. So Bukovina, the north part of Moldavia, was captured, was occupied by Austro-Hungarian Empire. In fact, first of all, Austrian Empire, after that, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Olive situation of Romania in the central part of Europe, in this status of Duchy of Bukovina, Ducat of Bukovina, starting with 1864, generated a sort of mental mobility, a territorial mobility, entrepreneurship status different from the Moldavia, different from the other part of Romanian territory as province, historical province. The historical province of Romania and the historical map of this one, this map, seems to show to us the special position of Bukovina between Transylvania and Pocuția, there in Ukraine now and in Polish. This is why the administration of Austro-Hungarian Empire consider that is extremely important, these links between Central Europe and Eastern Europe through Bukovina. But in fact, Bukovina has a lot of resources necessary for economic development for these authorities in Vienna and Budapest. So for exploitation, this one, they brought here population from other countries of Europe and generated a mix of structure of population. Now we called this one multiculturalism from historical point of view generated. Bukovina has a peculiar case of implementation of new administrative structure. They not to the ethno-linguistic and confessional structure of population added through colonization from autochthonous, one dominated by Romania, or created enclaves or local dominant allochthon population, as in Mureș, Bihor, Bistrița Năsud, Timiș County in Romania. New settlement for the exploitation of mineral resources. This administration implemented a system of managing existing forest fund, implementation of educational system, modern transport system in Bukovina. This is why in Bukovina, this territory belongs in the end part of 18th century, also 19th century, and the first part of 20th century, generated territory inhabited by German, Polish, Slovaks in Bukovina. That means it's multiculturalism, which could be observed and maintained and the subject of different researches, because this one is a reflection of historical evolution of the region. Along the history, different evolution structure of communities population, even if by spontaneous immigration and by colonization, because this territory polarized economical one. The ethnical structure was changed along the 19th century by Austro-Hungarian Empire, as we said, and socio-economic evolution was toward the Bukovina region, a Bukovinian landscape, a Bukovinian behavior, even if is more than 120 years from the period of independence of this territory and come to the Romania after 1980. A territory characterized by association between man and space, from a cultural pre-modern economic value, dispersed and agriculture society, in the period of 17 and 18th century towards Central Europe influence, a complex of pre-industrial and market society. But in our days, of course, we saw also communities, and there are communities, besides the native Romanian one, the core, the background, there are Germans, Hungarian, Jews, Armenian, Hutsunians, Ukrainian, and so on, each with a way of life adapted to a local culture, natural landscape, generating a specific cultural landscape. Cultural landscape, in fact, is a sort of territorialization of this multiculturalism in Bukovina. But in nowadays, before the revolution, the communist period imposed a forced assimilation of the ethnic group German, Polish, Jews. They largely immigrated, for example, Jews in Palestine. Multiculturalism was the premise of building a society of tolerance and space analyzed. The consequences of colonization, we just highlighted some ideas. There are local economic perspective in rural urban area, the effect of cultural landscape. For example, in the map, we'll see some of the colonies nearby the rural villages of southern Bukovina, specialized also in processing metals, complex war in the area of Fundul Moldovi, Vama, Pojurete, Iacoben, and so, and the diversity of ethnic mosaic in Bukovina. This one because, of course, of this activity of colonization in Bukovina. The population ethnic structure in Suceava County after the census published in 2011 seems to have also a structure with Gypsies, Ukrainian, Polish, Russian, Germans, other ethnies, Hungarians, Jews. That means a population not very in high level, a number, only about 50,000 people inhabitant in Suceava County, but in fact, the image of these communities of Romanians, also with Hutsans or Ukrainians or in Germans seems to have a special mental mobility, because just between these two periods, 2016 and 2021, the image of the villages was changes. Of course, due to the finance of European Union and so on, but the speed of this transformation, of this dynamic, is maybe links to multiculturalism also. Economic cycles and territorial population dynamics as a cycle for forest exploitation, mining cycle, development of sustainable agriculture and economic restructuring after 1990, forestry and agro-pastoral exploitation, and nowadays tourist development, revival industrial tradition, local entrepreneurship, small entrepreneur, generated a change of image of rural space in Bukovina. The current effect of multiculturalism in Bukovina is inherited to historical one and deeply cultural Romanian background, the capacity of local Romanian population to assimilate the cohabitant nationality, the increased mobility of the population, due to cultural infusion followed one another over time, generated by multiculturalism of the historical province of Bukovina, but also cultural diffusion associated with the contemporary perspective of population mobility generated as a result of large number of immigrants. Multiculturalism of the Bukovina space generating economic and social effect, even if that means permanent immigrants and permanent immigrants between 2007 2021 in Bukovina is not in high number, but the effect on the cultural landscape and in population, multicultural population is also important. Thank you. We hope that our presentation brings to you region not very high, not very high development, economic development, but with a special dynamicity due to multiculturalism infusion along the time. Thank you again.
Hello to everybody. I am Professor Dan Gabriel Sîmbotin from Gheorghe Institute of Economic and Social Research of Romanian Academy Iași branch, and I want to present the paper on outlook of being Romanian in the European Union, mentalities and epistemic limits of communication. We start this paper with a short introduction. It's well known the idea the European Union is a space of democracy and human rights. The motto of European Union, Unity in Diversity, denotes the idea of equal rights, inclusion, and acceptance. The first article of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union is human dignity is inviolable. It must be respected and protected. These deep words underline the importance of equal individual dignity and of the human being's rights. It's not about groups or a full society, but a person. This utopian situation could happen in reality. For this is necessary good legislation and a good education on tolerance and inclusion. Starting from this, we will present how Romania feels inside the European Union after a continuous struggle for being it. Romanians still have hope regarding Europe. The last Eurobarometer showed us that 52% of Romanians trust the European Union. It is over the European Union average of 47%. At the same time, the Romanians are not trustful persons. Only 23% of him trust in the national parliament and 21% of them in the government. Despite these pro-European feelings, some Romanians don't feel welcome inside of the European Union. They are examples of discrimination, marginalization, and misunderstanding of Romanian tradition. For a real unity in diversity, it's important that efforts being made by both sides. The first is about integration and respect for European Union, but at the same time it is important to understand others. And in this situation, Romanians are the other, with their value, habits, and mentalities. It is very important for an institution based on the collaboration between countries to be focused on equal rights and to try not to develop the idea of discrimination by the nation of countries. First, we discuss about diversity, face-to-face with tolerance, inclusion, understanding, and communication. In 2020, the University of Cambridge changed in their guidelines the respect with tolerance. This example proved us the importance of the debate about tolerance and human rights and some misjudged related to the term. This kind of action is a proof of misunderstanding tolerance. Replaces a word with another doesn't help. In this case, it was worse because respect proved dignity, a relation between two peoples from the same level, at least. At the same time, tolerance is from to tolerate and imply a relation of low lines between a person who is right and somebody with bad habits. The example from the Cambridge Dictionary is totally relevant. I can tolerate her selfishness, but not her bad mood. Both words, respect and tolerance, are not enough to solve the problem. Concrete social action based on the feeling of empathy and rational analysis of understanding other are a good start. All these need to fulfill and help people. Most important is not developing more borders and walls and an artificial segregation between human beings. European Union is the most important community of independent countries based on national free will, where every country has a huge power of decision through veto rights. This big space was created starting from the idea of removing borders into a space of peace, democracy, well-being, and dignity. But at the same time, they are constructing new borders and new limits, EU and Schengen borders, and the economic limits of the euro. These new worlds strengthen the old social ones founded on stereotypes, in group-based friendship, or spatial segregation. The inequalities between insiders and outsiders increase continually in relation to the economic and so-called national interest. Romania was the both part of this burden and somehow still is, and the deep feeling of being an outsider, misunderstood and misjudged remains alive and in increase with every new injustice. The stereotypes and spatial segregation are still active in relation to Romania and Romanians, and positive attitude about European Union have transformed step by step in Euroscepticism. One of the most known stereotypes is related to communism. The communism ages are guilty of Romania's economic situation, corruption, mentalities, political context, so on. Unfortunately, these are partial true. The 45 years of communism determined habits and social types, fear and distrust. You know, the political police was very tough in Romania. Family, close friends, and colleagues could betray you. Another idea is about independence or autonomy. This is in opposition to mandatory introduction into communities like collectivization, syndicates, or membership of Communist Party organization. And not the last, it's about insubordination that is also in opposition with communist time constraint. Okay, all these social characters are identified as part of Romanian psychology. But it's very important. Part of it have fortified the mentality that existed before the communist ages. But at the same time, the systematical manipulation determines specific attitude and habits related to Romanian communist propaganda. The well-known image of the savior leader who takes care of the people. The people have the power. The owners exploit the workers, and the foreigner want to rob us are just few of these ideas. In the first years after 1989 revolution, the population of Romania lives a true madness determined by the antinomy: freedom versus communist mentalities. The facts prove this. The Romanian Revolution was very violent, real liberation and desire for freedom. But immediately after, the control was taken by the member of the second level of the Communist Party. Ion Iliescu became the new image of the savior leader. On 20th May 1990, the first post-communism free election for presidency, Ion Iliescu was elected with 85%. The Romania was the only country from the east of Europe that after the revolution it didn't lead by the reformists. The manifestation for freedom after the election was stopped by the so-called mineriad. Okay, the miners symbolize the power of the workers, save the revolution, attack the manifestation from Piața Universității, and attack the authorities after. There was three very important mineriad. June 1990, September 1991, and January 1999. All these marginalized Romania in the relation with the European Union and determined an image of an unreformed country. The Left Party, even called FSN, FDSN, PSD, PDSR, so on, has been considered a communist, non-reformist, and corrupt party. But one of the Romanian paradoxes is so-called communists signed to accession to NATO in 2004 and negotiated and made a reform for joining to the European Union. So now, answering to the question, is communism still here in Romania? The answer is yes, in a low percent of our mentalities, but truly not if it is about politicians and the parties. There are no more real communist politicians. Another important aspect is about the feeling of Romanians like permanent outsiders. After 1990, Romanians feeling marginalized, being continuous to the other part of a border. There were continuous delays. It was accessed in the second wave into NATO in 2004, in European Union in 2007. Now we are not still part of Schengen or US visa waiver program. Example of the extension to the Schengen is relevant. There were objective requests that Romania fulfilled since 2011. Since that moment, yearly, Romania was rejected without any objective or legal reason. How could we not feel marginalized or outsiders? The third very important problem is about Romanian feeling of guilty. Under the pressure of communism, continued manipulation, the control of other empires, and the late emancipation, Romanians developed a deep feeling of guilty. The majority of Romanians are proud of themselves, of their country, but at the same time, based on our disconnect and untrust of authorities, we developed easily a bad image of ourselves. Also, we easily assume critics. The example of the image of Romania as a corrupt country is relevant. The negative impression of the corruption is statistically higher than the corruption itself. When Romania was monitored by European Union Commission of Justice through the cooperation and verification mechanism, Romanians accepted this with a positive attitude. Also, the Romanian internal rules for controlling the spending of European funds are more drastic than the European ones. In conclusion, yes, we are pro-European. We consider a fair European Union it's a real solution for Europe. But a fair European Union needs to focus on all necessity in a political strategy of win-win negotiation. The so-called national interest could block the positive evolution and create a disadvantage to the level of countries. That happened frequently with Romanian Romanians, but despite what happened, we are still pro-European country. Introduce here two movies with stereotypes about Romania. After you see this movie, you could realize how easy it is to transmit the false image of a country.
My name is Dumitru Lisnic. I am a lecturer at Bălți University, the Republic of Moldova. I am interested in Soviet history and ethno-religious minorities in Eastern Europe, and currently I am conducting my research on the relations between Soviet regime and religious communities in the 1920s Ukraine. Today I'm going to speak to you about the recent Moldova's history and particularly Moldova between East and West, and about the place played by the secret police archives in this recent history. Moldova's archives of the former Soviet secret police contain tens of thousands of investigation case files and other documents related to Soviet repressive policies. The status of these archives has been disputed over the past 3 decades after Moldova's 1991 independence. The post-communist history of the archives encapsulates the political struggle around Moldova's identity and external policy. Since 1991, Moldova's society has been divided on what is the name of its official language, Romanian or Moldovan, was the Soviet annexation of 1940 a liberation or an occupation, should Moldova go east or move toward the west. Moldova has been experiencing a difficult transition from its Soviet past to an independent statehood. In 1992, less than a year after declaring its independence, Moldova faced a military aggression orchestrated by Russia, whose army has been stationed in its eastern region of Transnistria and was actively involved in the conflict. The 1992 war was also fueled by the discontent of city dwellers, most of whom were Russian speakers, discontent with the 1989 decree of the Moldovan authorities declaring Romanian as the sole official language in the country. Moldova's independence and pro-Western policy has been disputed even among ethnic Moldovans, most of whom lived until 1991 in rural settlements and who were influenced by Soviet propaganda during more than 4 decades of Soviet occupation. The archives of the former Soviet secret police have constituted an object of extreme interest for the promoters of Moldova's national identity and language, and for those advocating for the preservation of Soviet values and closer relations with Russia, because these archives contain invaluable documentary proofs about the Soviet repressive policies. The most of the documentary materials inherited by Moldova from the former Soviet secret police are preserved in the repositories of Moldova's intelligence service. This institution is the heir of the Security Service of Soviet Moldavia. In 1991, other important archival fonds produced by the former secret police could be found in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, so in their archives, and in the party archive or the Archive of Social and Political Organization of Republic of Moldova, the new name for the archive of the former Communist Party of Moldavia. During Perestroika and in the early 1990s, Moldovan historians obtained access to the archives of intelligence service, and they researched such subjects as Moldova's anti-communist resistance movement from 1940s and 1950s and the operations of mass deportation. The objective of these historians was to bring to Moldova society the history of the fighters of anti-communist armed resistance and the life stories of the victims of Soviet repressive policies. Their publications were extremely popular in the context of Moldova's national revival of the 1990s. Some historians with pro-Soviet views investigated the archives and published a series of studies, but their research omitted such subjects as the anti-communist resistance of the 1940s. In 1995, the access to the archives was restricted again, and for the next 15 years, the researchers and citizens interested in the history of Soviet repressive policies could not enter the archives of the intelligence service. This restriction was imposed by the pro-Russian Agrarian Democratic Party, which won the elections of 1994. The leaders of this party ordered the destruction of a series of archival documents related to the repressive policies of the Soviet regime because they were afraid that historians will continue identifying and publishing documents related to the activity of public figures during the 1980s. Fortunately, some of these documents from the destroyed archival funds were published by historians, and the information from them is accessible in volumes of documents. Between 1998 and 2000, Moldova was ruled by a series of political coalitions, but without significant improvement for the access to police archives. Historians continued to publish their works based on accessible documentary sources and oral history interviews. They were publishing on such subjects as the post-war famine of 1946-1947, mass deportations of 1941, 49, and 51, and about anti-communist resistance. Likewise, numerous monuments dedicated to the memory of the victims of communism were erected in Moldova. Meanwhile, the pro-Russian parties continued to use the narratives of Soviet propaganda in their political message. Their political message diminished or omitted the importance of such historic subjects as the mass deportation or the famine and anti-communist resistance. The elections of 2001 and 2005 were won by the pro-Russian party, which took the name of the Party of Communists of Moldova. This party used to a wider extent the myths and narratives of Soviet propaganda, organizing different public manifestations dedicated to such historic figures as Lenin or to the memory of the Soviet soldiers who fought in the Second World War. Additionally, the leadership of this party attempted to impose new history textbooks. Fortunately, they didn't manage to impose them, and they tried to replace the old hand textbooks called Istoria Românilor, or the History of Romanians, with the books entitled Istoria Moldovei, the History of Moldavia, which presented a distorted version of the history of Moldova as a country separate from a linguistic and ethnic point of view from the rest of Romanian space. Likewise, the communists replaced in the constitution the term Romanian language with Moldovan language. It is important to mention that in essence this party took the name communist primarily in order to claim a Soviet legacy, while in its action it wasn't to a full extent a leftist party. The communists consolidated their control in the country, and the resistance to their rule manifested in different ways, including by public messages about the crimes committed by the Soviet regime and about the necessity of opening the archives. In 2009, the communist government was forced to resign and was replaced by a coalition of pro-Western parties. The Liberal Party had declared that one of its main goals was to open the access to secret police archives, using this argument in order to oppose its main rival, the Party of Communists. Likewise, this party advocated for closer relations with Romania and the European Union. In 2009, in the elections of 2009, the Liberals won 15% of votes and commenced their rule in coalition with other three pro-European parties. In 2010, the new president and the leader of the Liberal Party, Mihai Gimpu, issued a decree condemning the totalitarian regimes, the communist and the fascist one, and organized the Commission for the Study of the Communist Dictatorship in Moldova. From January to December 2010, the members of this commission had access to secret police archives. Nevertheless, the members of other pro-European parties did not agree with the Liberal Party on the necessity to change the legal status of the archives of intelligence service so that they could be accessed by historians. The solution of the Liberal Party was to transfer the most important files from the archives of intelligence service to the National Archive of Moldova. As a result, from 2010 to 2014, approximately 25,000 investigation case files, together with some small funds related to Soviet repressions in the region, were transferred to the National Archive. With the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the importance of the secret police archives has increased. They are an important part of the confrontation between Russia and former Soviet countries which choose to integrate with the European Union. The importance of the archives in these confrontations is reflected by the adoption of a series of laws in Russia which impose restrictions on what and how people can speak and write about the Soviet Union and its participation in the Second World War. At the same time, after 2014, Ukraine opened the archives inherited from the former Soviet secret police. Currently, other important initiatives are underway in Moldova. The new head of the archives is the historian Igor Kashu, who makes important efforts to continue the transfer of the files from the intelligence service to the National Archives. Some other important initiatives related to the archives have been made within the framework of the European Research Council project, Creative Agency and Religious Minorities, Hidden Galleries and the Secret Police Archives in Central and Eastern Europe. A team of researchers led by the anthropologist James Capallo has aimed at depoliticizing the archives. His team, which has conducted their research in 4 countries, in Hungary, Romania, Moldova and Ukraine. This team has examined textual and visual religious artifacts confiscated by the secret police and stored in the archives. Because of the persecutions, numerous religious communities could not preserve these artifacts, which instead can be found in archival repositories, where they were stored as incriminatory evidence. Identifying these artifacts and organizing exhibitions which present these artifacts to the wider public helps the researchers to deconstruct social stereotypes and depoliticize the archives. The archives are still an important issue in the Republic of Moldova, an important issue in these debates between the parties who promote pro-Western agenda with the parties who incline towards closer relations with Russia. But nevertheless, the archives has not been fully opened, so just a part of the files produced by the Soviet secret police in Moldavia has been transferred to the National Archive of Moldova and can be are in open access. The rest of them are still in the Archive of Intelligence Service. Besides some political resistance, I can say, to the opening of the archives, there are also some economic problems related to the lack of appropriate spaces where the archival funds can be transferred and people can access them, and also lack of funding. Thank you very much for attention. I hope this presentation, you'll find this presentation interesting. Thank you.
Hello, I'm a Professor Kim Sang-hun of the Department of South Slavic Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. I'm honored and excited to have the opportunity to present at this conference. But first, I should apologize that I'm coming down with a cold and my voice may not be the most pleasant to listen to. My presentation today is on the topic of unity in diversity in the former Yugoslavia region. But because it's such a broad topic, I'm only going to give you a general idea of what it's all about. Chapter 1 is about the concept of unity in diversity and the overall problem in the former Yugoslavia. Chapter 2 is a brief overview of the Croatian government's policy of unity in diversity since independence in 1991. And finally, Chapter 3 is about the similarities and differences in the unity in diversity policies of Croatia and Serbia, in which I will briefly talk about the governmental policy on unity in diversity in Serbia and Croatia. Let's read a passage that I think is important to understanding the theme of unity in diversity within the former Yugoslavia. The concept of unity in diversity refers to the idea that a diverse group of people can come together and find unity despite their differences. In the case of ex-Yugoslavia, the region was known for its ethnic, religious, and cultural diversity. However, this diversity also became a source of tension and conflict, leading to the eventual breakup of Yugoslavia. After the death of Josip Broz Tito, the leader who held the country together for decades, Yugoslavia faced growing nationalist sentiments and political instability. The interplay of historical grievances, economic disparities, and competing national aspirations led to a series of conflicts in the 1990s. Notably, the Croatian War of Independence from 1991 to 1995 and the Bosnian War from 1992 to 1995. The breakup of Yugoslavia resulted in the emergence of independent states along ethnic lines such as Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, North Macedonia, and later Montenegro. The conflicts during this period were characterized by ethnic cleansing, mass killings, and displacement of populations, causing immense human suffering. The idea of unity in diversity in the context of ex-Yugoslavia was severely challenged by the ethno-nationalist ideologies and aspiration that fueled the conflicts, rather than embracing the diversity of the region. Political leaders and extremist groups manipulated ethnic and religious differences to advance their own agendas, leading to deep divisions and hostility. It is important to note that the concept of unity in diversity is an ideal that can be challenging to achieve to achieve in complex and deeply divided societies. In the case of ex-Yugoslavia, the diversity was not effectively managed, and underlying tensions and grievances were exacerbated, ultimately leading to the dissolution of the country and devastating conflicts that followed. Since Croatia's independence from Yugoslavia in 1991, the Croatian government has generally emphasized the policy of unity in diversity. This policy recognizes and respects the diversity of ethnic, linguistic, and religious groups within the country while promoting national unity. The Constitution of Croatia guarantees the protection of national minorities and their rights, including the right to use their language and script, participate in public life, and preserve their cultural heritage. The government has established various institutions and mechanisms to promote and protect minority rights, such as the Council of National Minorities and the Office for Human Rights and Rights of National Minorities. However, it is important to note that despite the government's efforts, challenges and tensions related to ethnicity, language, and national identity still exist in Croatia. Historical and political factors continue to influence inter-ethnic relations, and occasional disagreements or conflicts may arise. Nonetheless, the government's policy of unity in diversity underscores its commitment to promoting inclusivity and ensuring equal rights and opportunities for all citizens. While both Croatia and Serbia have diverse populations and face challenges related to ethnic, religious, and cultural diversity, there are at least 5 similarities and differences in their approaches to unity in diversity policies, including the following. First, the historical context. Second, the ethno-linguistic composition. Third, EU membership. And fourth, minority rights and legislation. Fifth, regional cooperation. It's worth noting that the policies and approaches toward diversity in Croatia and Serbia can be influenced by various factors, including historical events, political dynamics, regional context, and EU integration. So there you have it. A brief look at the topic of unity in diversity in the former Yugoslavia, Croatia, and Serbia. Thank you for listening, even if it was an uncomfortable voice. Thank you very much.
Okay. At first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Chul-Min Kim. I worked in the Department of South Slavic Studies at Hangul University of Foreign Studies. My major was the history of the international relations of the Central and Eastern Europe. In this paper, I'd like to explain why Bosnia, called like as the mosaic of religion and culture, it focused on the two historical factors. In reading this sentence, I will start. When considering cultural traits and aspects of the Balkan, the word mosaic of religion and culture can be used to describe the historical background of the Balkans. In ancient times, the Balkans were located at the divergence between Eastern and Western Rome, and between the Rome Church and the Constantinople Church. After the Balkans were occupied by Ottoman Turkey from the 14th century, this area came under the influence of Islamic culture. As a result, the Balkans have been witness a very complicated distribution of religion and culture. The cultural scope of the Balkans can be characterized by five types of religion based on 15% or more of religions distribution. For example, Slovenia and Croatia, the Catholic category, and Serbia, Montenegro, Romania, and Bulgaria, under the Orthodox, and Albania, Islam culture. Russia, Macedonia appears to be a mixture between Orthodox and Islam. And this case of this paper, Bosnia-Herzegovina is remarkably complicated in religion and culture, resulting from Catholic, Orthodox, and Islamic influence. So, Bosnia can be viewed as a reduced place of Balkan Europe. Actually, in Bosnia, there are three main ethnic groups according to religious classification. Bosniaks believe Islam and the largest population of group, then Slavs, Serbian Orthodox, and finally Croatians believes Catholic. With this background of information in mind, this paper attempts to explain the reasons why Bosnia is being called the representative mosaic region of the religion and culture, and the representative class site of the civilization in the world. And this map explained about the religious distribution map of the Europe. For example, Bosnia is located in here. This line is the western part, that is the Catholic territory, and then since after that 60 centuries divided into the Protestant and in the southern part is the Catholic territory, and the eastern part is the Orthodox territory, and especially green color. Green color, it means that it's the Islamic culture and Islam, and especially Bosnia is located on the borderline between Catholic and Orthodox and Eastern and Western Rome, and the last line of the Islamic culture in the Europe. So, with this historical background, I would like to why Bosnia called it as the mosaic of religion and culture. The first reason is like this. First, the historical background that Bosnia has been called the representative mosaic region of the religion and culture is that this area, Bosnia, was geopolitically located on the border dividing Eastern and Eastern Europe and the separate line of the Eastern and Western Church. When analyzing Bosnia from a historical and geopolitical point of view, it is important to consider the country's location in terms of its strategic importance from antiquity to the end of the 20th century. In ancient times, Bosnia was the diverging point between Eastern and Western Rome. It served as the link between Catholic, and Orthodox. So, from the ancient times to the Middle Ages, Bosnia was at the forefront of fierce competition and conflict to expand the influence of various powers and religions. South Slavs settled in Bosnia in 60th and 70th centuries. They tried to live in harmony with each other throughout their long history. But, however, after the Great Schism of Christianity in 1054, the conflict and the confrontation between the two churches, Catholic and Orthodox, intensified, and Bosnia had to suffer various pains, such as various foreign invasions. For example, Hungary. Hungary has been seeking territory expansion into Bosnia since conquering Croatia. In addition, the laboring Orthodox kings of Serbia and Bulgaria also pushed for territory expansion into Bosnia. Hungary, Serbia, and Bulgaria decided that the Bosnia Church was a heresy, and this became the reason for the invasion of Bosnia by these kingdoms. The Bosnia South Slavs found it difficult to have deep faith, which later became the background for large-scale conversion to Islam under the rule of Ottoman Empire. This map, it means that is the division of the Roman Empire, especially this divide line is located on the Bosnia and Serbia and Croatia. In this part is the Catholic Church, and this part is the Orthodox Constantinople Church. And in the map 3, it means that is the express about the great schism of Christianity. This line, this western part is the Roman Catholic, and this part is the Orthodox Constantinople Church. And also Bosnia was located on between two churches. And second reason I can describe like this: the Ottoman Empire's system of law, for example, military system, and the horizon of Islamic culture in Europe. Sultan Mehmed II of Ottoman Turkey ended the medieval kingdom of Serbia in 1459 with the capture of Portuguese Smederevo. Smederevo was the last capital city of the Serbian medieval kingdom. And he continued his war of conquest for Bosnia, capturing Blue Bosnia in 1451. And finally, he also occupied the medieval kingdom of Bosnia. Since then, Islamic culture and religion have expanded in Bosnia. And as a result, Bosnia has become a mosaic of three complex religions and cultures. Since ancient times, the majority of lovers in Bosnia, they had weak Christianist faith because they were located on the border of belief between Catholic and Orthodox, so more easily turned to Islam. And the believers of Bosnia Church also, they had been persecuted by both churches, so also more easily converted to Islam on a large scale. By crossing over to Islam, they were able to retain their former wealth and prestige. As a result, Islam and Islamic culture spread in Bosnia under the rule of Ottoman Turkey. On the other hand, the Slavs in Bosnia who refused to convert to Islam, they had to maintain their religious beliefs under the millet system. The millet system was the religious communities under Ottoman Turkish rule. Under this system, other religions, such as Christians and Jews, could be tolerated under Turkish rule. They were defined as members of recognized self-governing religious communities that came to be known as millet system. For example, Orthodox is called as the millet Iram. Millet Iram, it means there is the Latin people. No, Roman people. And the Catholic, Christian and Catholic believers called like as the millet Latin. So after the second Vienna invasion of the Ottoman Turkey in 1683 has ended the imperial Ottoman Turkey and Habsburg Empire concluded the Treaty of Sremski-Karlovy. Sremski-Karlovy is a very important treaty between Ottoman Turkey and Habsburg Empire. And also, it is a very important treaty to the Slavs in Bosnia. Because according to this treaty, in Bosnia was established a border between both empires. Ottoman Turkey's defeat in Vienna helped proclaim across Europe the emergence of the Habsburg Empire as the real defender of the region. Especially, Vienna was finally saved from the Ottoman Turkish threat that had been present since 1529, and this signaled the beginning of the Europe's long stability and prosperity that was followed by the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. By contrast, Ottoman Turkey must came to the have each notorious nickname, the Sick Man of Europe. According to this treaty, Bosnia was required to lie under the boundary of both empires. Consequently, for the next 200 years, for Ottoman Turkey, Bosnia was recognized as the last line of defense against the expansion of the Western Empire. For the Habsburg Empire, Bosnia was perceived as its first sphere of interest for full conquest of Balkan Europe. Bosnian Muslims were allowed to form according to the Balkan domination of Ottoman Turkey. After that time, despite the hostile and uncertain environment, they strove to maintain and develop their own history and traditions, which they continue to do to the present. Territorial changes of Ottoman Empire. This map we can understand is that this purple line. This purple line was the last line of the Ottoman Turkeys in the Balkan Europe. So at this point, this area was the Bosnia. So Bosnia became the very important political line and became a very important political place for Ottoman Turkey against the Western power. I would like to conclude. Since ancient times, Bosnia has been located at the crossroads of Eastern and Western cultures and religions, and this has formed the background for Bosnia to be called a mosaic of religions and culture in the world. Depending on these historical factors, Bosnia today is called a microcosm of Balkan Europe and a mosaic among mosaics of religions and culture, or a melting pot of the world religion and culture. These historical factors made Bosnia the epicenter of the First World War with the Sarajevo gunfire in 1940, and the suffering continued, and at the end of the 20th century, Bosnia had to be the main stage of ethnic cleansing. I hope that this paper, which examines the origins of religion and culture with a focus on Bosnia, will be helpful for all the Eastern European countries and European countries that are experiencing similar problems. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Tae Hyun Oum. I'm a senior researcher at East European and Balkan Institute at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. My presentation is about multilingual policy in Romania after accession to EU. This study aims to examine Romania's multilingual policy after joining the European Union. To this end, the article focuses on historical changes in Romanian multilingual policy after the transition of 1989. There are three major inflection points concerning Romania's multilingual policy after the transition of 1989, which can be objectively verified through changes in laws and policies. In trying to integrate into Europe, Romania recognized issues related to the rights and interests of minorities, especially Hungarian minorities, as a critical problem. Romania is changing in the direction of pluralism, in which the rights and interests of minorities are more guaranteed through institutional flexibilities. Within the EU countries, there are diverse attitudes about state minorities according to the history and tradition of how they are constituted. However, the fact that the language of minorities should be used without discrimination is consistent with the direction of the European Union language policies. The Constitution of Romania, amended in 1991, included guarantees of the linguistic rights of minorities. Because the Sixth Constitution of Romania, amended in 1965, the last constitution before 1991, also included phrases protecting the rights and interests of minorities. Superficially, it could be recognized that not much was changes in the Constitution of 1991 amendment regarding protecting minorities' rights. Some contents, however, have been added and materialized. The main related contents are as follows. First, in Article 6, the following sentences are included. First, the state recognizes and guarantees the rights of persons belonging to national minorities to preserve, develop, and express their ethnic, cultural, linguistic, and religious identity. Second, the protection measures taken by the Romanian state for the reservation, development, and expression of identity of the persons belonging to national minorities should conform to the principles of equality and non-discrimination about other Romanian citizens. Article 32 also includes the following sentences. The right of persons belonging to national minorities to learn their mother tongue and their right to be educated in this language are guaranteed. The ways to exercise these rights shall be guaranteed by law. In addition, Article 62 includes organizations of citizens belonging to national minorities which fail to obtain the number of votes for representation in Parliament have the right to one deputy seat each. Under the terms of the electoral law, citizens of national minority are entitled to be represented by one organization only. What is noteworthy in 1991 Constitution is that it includes and describes the principle of individuals. The fact that the language of minorities is legally protected can be divided into principles of territory and principles of individuals. Principles of territory mean that the geographical density of the minority group determines legal guarantees for the language of a minority. For example, the figure of 20% is referred to the law of number 282 in 2007, which ratified the ECRML, European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, takes into account the percent of the population of ethnic minorities relative to the total population per territory. The principles of individuals refer to the legal authority that a minority can obtain regardless of where it resides. In reality, the principles of individuals can be a more difficult and complex process, as it can only be adjusted from two perspectives. Protection of the rights of minority languages and management at a reasonable level using limited resources. The spirit of the Constitution amended in 1991 is meaningful in that it expresses the principles of the individual. Nevertheless, stipulating the ratio of at least 20% of minority at a municipal region is applied as the criterion in some lower laws, and it seems that the principles of territory is generally applied in reality in administrative authorities. This part is fundamental matter related to the rights of minorities' language and remains an essential issue until recently. The legal guarantee for minority languages in Romanian law appears to be at a reasonable high level. In the early 1990s, however, Romania was generally evaluated as a country following the trend of nationalism, continuing the policies of the communist period prior to 1989. Although the 1991 Constitution contains the spirit of protecting minorities, in actual politics, far-right nationalist parties were quite dominant in Romania in the first half of the 1990s. Hungarian as a minority language was discriminated against in lower laws. The education law promulgated by Romanian President Ion Iliescu on July 24, 1995, law number 84 in 1995 is a good example. Although this bill received strong resistance from the Hungarian minority party, UDMR, and was pointed out in a European Parliament resolution that it would seriously damage the rights of minorities, the bill was proclaimed. It shows the relationship between ruling party at the time, the PDSR, and the far-right nationalist parties that tactically supported them. In addition, the local administrative law number 69 in 1991 also caused much controversy. Article 54 of the law stipulates that in the relationship between local administrative agencies and citizens, minorities may communicate in their oral or written language in receiving administrative services. However, it requires a notarized document in Romanian as a condition, which makes it costly and time-consuming, virtually nullifying the possibility of communication in minority language. Another problem was the condition that documents issued by administrative authorities were also issued in the official language, that is, in Romanian. After the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, which is called also ECRML, was adopted by the European Parliament in 1992, the UDMR sought ratification of the Charter by Romanian Parliament, but this was not done. It was done in 2007 when Romania joined the European Union. The change began in an international context where European society wanted to resolve the conflict between Hungary and Romania. The European community's pressure to improve relations between Hungary and Romania intensified. The victory of the CDR, a right-wing coalition with a pro-European character, in the presidential election of 1996 also influenced the change in minority policy. The first attempt was the European Stability Pact proposed by French Prime Minister Balladur at the European Council held in Copenhagen in July 1993. The purpose of this plan was to create a balance between the kinship countries and the resident countries of the minority through a balanced bilateral treaty, and to make this treaty serve as a critical criterion for joining the European Union. The Romanian political circles were hostile at first, considering it as interference in internal affairs, as the international community had mentioned the minority issue. However, after the EU accepted the plan, Romania became positive and reconsidered this issue. Since then, the language policies have been changed to the direction of expanding the public function of minority languages in Romania, but this extent remained limited level. Remaining at a limited level means that for minority language to take on a public function, the local minority population must be at least 20%. Moreover, only some parts of the public function worked. The difference between legal guarantees for minority languages and the realization in real life has always been an issue. The trend has eased since 1996, but has continued in specific areas. For example, even in situations where minority languages may be used in discussion of public matters, they must be used as the language of meetings, but not as the language of recording the meeting or of decisions of an official nature. Therefore, it is not easy to specify how the regulations and reality are harmonized, but an exciting research idea shows the realities. In a study evaluating Romania's minority language policy, Horvath studied the reality in which legal norms applied, focusing on the problem of marking street signs. The research was based on the law number 215 promulgated on April 23, 2001, concerning the Romanian municipal public administration, which states local authorities must apply the law on the language rights of minorities. The results are as follows. About 79% responded positively to the question. The 2001 Act on Minority Languages applied in the present, and 75% responded positively to the question. Signs are written in bilingual language, including minority languages. In the cases of negative responses, it is not easy to describe all of them because there are various answers. However, this figure shows the approximate degree of implementation of minority language related legislations. Changes that began for integration into European society, such as Romania's accession to NATO in 2004 and EU in 2007, reached a critical inflection point in 2007 concerning minority languages. As Horvath's study discussed above, there may be difference between the law and its actual application to the rights and interests of minority languages. However, the law could be a starting point for deriving changes in terms of social structure. Romania has enacted Law number 282 in 2007, ratifying the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages. This law aims to protect minority languages spoken in Romania, not to ensure that the Romanian and other minority languages have equal legal status. The relevant articles of Law number 282 provides a concrete picture of the extent of legal guarantees for the languages of minorities in Romania. It can be seen that the law number 282 guarantees the rights of Hungarian and other minority languages at the highest level. In Romania, the legal status of Romanian and other minority languages are separated. Article 13 of Constitution stipulates that the official language of Romania is Romanian. In addition, to be recognized as a minority language in various administrative, judicial, and educational institutions, the provision that the proportion of the ethnic minority within a municipal area must be 20% or more is also in Law number 282, ratifying the ECLML. These two issues are evaluated as representative parts that show the Romania's language policy is not oriented toward a multilingual society. In this regard, a study analyzing Romania's multilingual policy evaluates that Romania's language policy is still nationalistic and exclusive even after 2007. This study is noteworthy in dealing with significant issues related to multilingual policy. This study examines the overall linguistic status of Hungarian remaining as minorities in specific regions of several countries in Central and Eastern Europe. Among the specific regions in 7 countries, Vojvodina in Serbia is classified as the only region where multilingual use is guaranteed by policy, and the remaining 6 regions are all classified as pursuing nationalistic language policy. The basis for classifying the Vojvodina area as multilingual in this study is that all languages are used equally. According to this study, most region residents, by tradition and culture, communicates in their region's 6 languages, with speakers speaking their own L1 language and listeners understand these languages other than L1 to themselves. They understand their language each other perfectly, whereas in Transylvania, in Romania, the minority Hungarian understands the majority language, Romanian, whereas Romanians barely understand the Hungarian. In other words, if the Vojvodina area is inclusive and pluralistic, the Transylvania region is nationalistic and pursues assimilation. In addition, to be recognized as a minority language, the proportion of the population in a municipal area must be at least 20%, which indicates that Romania's multilingual policy is exclusive and limited according to this study. A country's constitution's designation of an official language is crucial in revealing its national identity. The fact that Romania designates Romanian as its official language reveals its national identity. Romania does not consider the languages of several ethnic groups, including the Hungarian minority, to be on equal footing with Romanian. This aspect can be also seen in Constitution of Slovakia, where the Hungarian minority is concentrated, similar to Romania. The concept most commonly applied as a principle of multilingualism is the coexistence of many languages. The European Commission also presents this concept. Romania does not interpret the concept of multilingual society as complete equality between Romanian and several minority languages. This attitude may be more practical option, albeit less egalitarian than in Vojvodina region. Suppose there is a consensus and agreement that a nation's identity is based on dual or multiple ethnic communities during historical development and individual cultural circumstances. In that case, the Constitution designates all languages of these communities as official languages. Switzerland is one such example. Romania is not a case in point. Expecting the status of Romanian and Hungarian language to be equal in this region is inconsistent with the spirit of multilingualism, which expect the regional stability and peaceful coexistence. In recognition of rights to minority languages, the provision that 20% or more of the local members must be ethnic minorities is shown in Article 7 of Law Number 282, enacted in 2007. This part supports the argument that Romania's minority language policy is exclusive. The concentration of minorities is considered a key criterion in ensuring the use of minority languages in various fields such as education, administration, and justice. Even if the proportion of minorities is high nationwide, if they exist scattered, there will inevitably be practical difficulties such as economic cost in guaranteeing rights for all minority languages. However, depending on regional circumstances, for example, if the possibility of recognizing minorities is left open so that flexible standards can be applied, it will help the rights and interests of minorities. Nevertheless, this could create another conflict. Romania's Prime Minister Dăncilă government issued an emergency government order number 57 to amend this part in 2019. The provisions of paragraph 94 of this order are amended to ensure the use of minority language at the decision of the local administrative agency, even if the number of minorities in jurisdiction is not more than 20%. The order was interpreted as leaving open the possibility that recognition of minority language criteria could be neutralized and raised to the level of the official language Romanian, depending on the decision of local governments and institutions. Furthermore, criticisms arose that only strengthened the role of Hungarian minorities as casting voters. However, from the perspective of multilingual society, it would be ideal if it could be flexibly adjusted according to mutual understanding and consensus among residents rather than being tied to the figure of 20%. The key is considered to be whether this system can be operated reasonably rather than the 20% rule. Romania was in favorable environment for mixing different cultures in terms of geography and geopolitics, which was manifested in the process of historical development. Transylvania is a perfect example. As Romania went through the complicated 20th century, there were many dissonances and conflicts, especially with the Hungarian minority. Romania pursued structural changes to a society that conformed to European values with the fundamental goal of transitioning into the European Union after transition. Multiculturalism and multilingualism being essential directions in this regard. Through the inflection point of EU accession, Romania has achieved significant improvements in laws and institutions, but conflicts with ethnic minorities remain, and many problems remain to be resolved. Even after joining the European Union, Romania continues to compromise with minorities, and through this, it is improving existing laws and systems related to minorities.
My name is Shin Kyu. and I'm a researcher at East European and Balkan Institute. Now I'll be presenting on Europeanization of Central and Eastern European countries, focusing on the change of diplomatic preference and strategy of the Czech Republic. In the first part of this presentation, I will focus on EU's accession and Europeanization of the Czech Republic. Since 2004, 11 Central and Eastern European countries, including the Czech Republic, joined the European Union. Since accession to the European Union, political and economic achievements of the Central and Eastern European countries have continued. At the same time, their foreign and security strategies have changed fundamentally. Before EU accession, key diplomatic and security goal for CEC was to become EU member, but after that goal was achieved, they had to set new goals and mobilize new means to achieve them. As EU member states, CECs have been expected to gradually play active role in the EU's various policy areas, moving away from their initial passive position. And at the same time, they try to project their respective diplomatic and security priorities onto the EU, which otherwise are difficult to achieve on their own. In this respect, this presentation examines the changes of diplomatic and security interests of the Czech Republic after joining the European Union, and how its vital interests and policy priority could be reflected on the EU level through Europeanization from below. In the second part, I will explain Europeanization as a multidimensional process. The concept of Europeanization can be interpreted in various ways, but most commonly it refers to a deepening interaction among the member states. It may be a convergence process in which member states and European institutions are so closely interconnected that they are identified with each other. Therefore, the Europeanization can be understood as a multidimensional process. The first process is top-down Europeanization or downloading process, in which member states adapt to the EU's institutions, laws, and adapt to European decision-making process. If this Europeanization proceeds smoothly, that is, if a member state adapts to the institutions' rules and participates in the decision-making process as a normal member state, it may be Europeanized without any problem. The second is the from below Europeanization or uploading process, in which member states can project their national interests and policy priority onto the decision-making process. Once it can succeed in achieving their national goals by uploading its interest to the EU policy, then it will more actively try to project national interests and priorities onto the EU level. However, if this process is interrupted, they may feel left out of the EU's decision-making process and may stop or resist top-down Europeanization. For this reason, Europeanization can be said to be cyclical and constitutive process, not one-way or one-off process between the institutions and member states. Therefore, the Europeanization has third process, that is a horizontal Europeanization or cross-loading process, in which a member state imitates and learns from other member states while European institutions. In other words, horizontal Europeanization can be understood as a transnational process of imitation, learning, and policy transfer that occur voluntarily among them. It can also trigger off more exchange of people, information, thoughts, norms, and behavior patterns among member states and institutions. As a candidate before 2004 and as a former member state after 2004, the Czech Republic has been forced to adopt EU's rules, laws, and policies and strategies that it had not participated in making, and adapt EU's institutions and various decision-making processes. Right after joining the European Union, because the Czech Republic had not knowledge and experience how the EU works and decide important European policies, it was just a policy taker which couldn't exert any influence on European affairs and couldn't project national interest onto the European policy. Since accession as a former member state, it has gradually represented in all major EU institutions and participated in policy-making process. As it keeps learning and getting experience, it gradually has become a policymaker to influence key decisions and institutions in the European Union. And in the third part, I will be presenting on the Europeanization and the Czech's foreign policy. Since the regime change in 1989, human rights and democracy promotion have always been top priority of Czech foreign policy. Before the accession, it had a stronger position and spoke with uncompromising voice on those issues than any other European countries. But with EU membership, its strategy and action to promote human rights and democracy in Balkan and Eastern Europe has been changed to Western European prudent style. As a member state, it has tried to coordinate and cooperate with EU institutions and other member states. In other words, rather than acting independently, it has a custom to use the EU's diplomatic tools and cooperate with major EU member states to achieve its foreign policy goals. In terms of security strategy, the Czech Republic has continued dependence on US and NATO for its external security. Despite of strong opposition from Germany and other major EU states, it supported the 2003 US war in Iraq based on its pro-US Atlantic orientation. But as an EU member, it has begun to follow the EU's foreign and security strategy rather than the United States. Moreover, during its EU presidency in the first half of 2009, it adopted a national security strategy similar to EU's and acted like other EU member states. In spite of a pro-US Atlantic tradition, the Czech Republic has followed common European security strategy and actively participated in common foreign and security policy and common security defense policy. Besides, it has promoted the European Union to assist and integrate the countries of Western Balkans and Eastern Europe. Changes can be found on the energy security. The Czech Republic is one of the most reliant on Russian energy. It relies on Russia for over 80% of its imported natural gas and oil. Right after joining the European Union, it could not influence on EU's energy policy to achieve its energy security. However, taking over the EU presidency in the first half of 2009, the Czech Republic made the energy security a key theme of EU presidency. As a new presidency, it accentuated the development of common energy security and the creating of the well-functioning internal energy market for reducing foreign energy dependency. In the final page, I'd like to present on becoming policymaker in the European Union. EU accession had required the member states to implement EU priorities and adapt existing national policies to EU rule and standards. And at the same time, member states can get an opportunity to influence on EU policymaking process for achieving its national goal. Since accession to the European Union, the Czech Republic has continuously exposed to the process of Europeanization. Because the Europeanization is a process of adopting EU's acquis and adapting European institutions and decision-making process, the Europeanization of the Czech Republic seems to be proceeding well, except some issue areas, such as monetary union. However, Europeanization does not necessarily mean that a member state is forced to adopt the EU's everything. Instead, Europeanization is not only the process of accepting and adapting to European institutions, laws, procedures, but also it is a process of upward projection of a national state's interests and priority onto the European policy. As a relatively small and a new member state, the Czech Republic initially had not succeeded to influence on decision-making process and play on leadership role in European affairs. During the first years as a member state, it was so passive that it could not formulate clear national position and upload its priority onto the EU level. It has been past 18 years since the Czech Republic joined the European Union. As a member state, it has been an active and influential actor in the EU decision-making and implementing EU's policies, such as the Common Energy Security, European Neighborhood Policy, including Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership. The Czech Republic is no longer just a passive policy taker, but an active policymaker. It can project its vital national interests and policy priorities onto the EU level and exert influence on various issue areas through so-called uploading Europeanization. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yong Kim, a professor of the Department of Policy Studies, Korea University of Foreign Studies. I'm delighted to be able to present at this international conference held today. The topic I'll be presenting today is changes in Polish society after accession to the EU. My presentation consists of 4 chapters. First chapter is introduction. In mid-1989, Poland began a new chapter in its post-war history and embarked on a long and difficult journey to transformation. Political changes in this process included breaking away from the existing socialist system and building a foundation for a democratic state marked by characteristics such as the rule of law and respect for human rights. Meanwhile, the goal of economic reform was to create a market economy in which labor and capital markets as well as goods and services markets functioned. Since the early 1990s, radical changes can also be observed in a field of Polish foreign policy. Among them, the issue of strengthening relations with the European Community was also included. Thus, already in 1994, Poland submitted an application to formally join the EU. The complex and lengthy accession process ended on May 1st, 2004, when Poland became a member of the EU. The purpose of this paper is to analyze the benefits and costs of Poland's accession to the EU 10 years after it became a member. In these processes, we will especially look at the following issues: the financial impact of becoming a member, implementation of the EU Common Area Policy, Poland's policy of economic, social, and territorial integration, the development of trade in goods in a single European market category, trends of Polish outbound migration to Western European labor markets under condition of European integration. The second chapter is Poland's image as a member of the EU, the pros and cons of the Polish economy. At the time of formal submission of the application for membership in the mid-1990s, Poland was considered a difficult, even controversial candidate for membership. Now, 10 years after joining the EU, it is time to evaluate Poland once a candidate for a membership and Poland as a full member in terms of economic strengths and weakness. The Poland's biggest advantage in joining the EU was its democratic potential. This is because Poland, with a population of 38 million, is treated as an important supply market in a single European market. Another advantage is low wages compared to a relatively high-level labor force. In addition, the advantageous geographic location connecting the east and west of the European continent also contributed to economic development. The strengths of the Polish economy include the growth in gross domestic product, GDP, which has been recorded steadily since 1992. Another strength that Poland has shown is the process of stably establishing a democratic system, adjusting, developing, and assimilating and adapting the Polish legal system to the standards required by the EU. Besides, the huge support shown by the Polish people during integration with the EU should be added to the list of merits. In a referendum held in June 2003, more than 70% of Poles voted in favor of joining the EU. On the other hand, weakness and deficiencies of the Polish economy during the process of joining the EU include a poor employment structure, an excessively high employment rate, especially in agriculture, and at the same time, a relatively low percentage of people employed in services. Another weakness of the Polish economy was the low level of GDP per capita. At the same time of joining the EU in 2004, Poland was the poorest country. At the time, Poland's GDP per capita was only 42% of the average of the EU's 15 member states. In this respect, Poland remained in a position of a net beneficiary in the EU budget sector, and therefore it was perceived as a significant burden to the member countries paying the budgets. Now, Chapter 3 is a positive and negative impact of joining the EU on Polish society. Poland's accession to the EU has brought influence various results with many economic and political influences along with various benefits. Among them, Poland's economic benefits are as follows. Elimination of quantitative and qualitative restrictions and tariffs in agricultural trade. Elimination of qualitative barriers to trade in manufactured goods. Free movement of service. Free movement of persons, including free movement of workers. Ensuring the right to participate in a common agricultural policy. Ensuring participation, in the formation of common regional policies and new policies on economic, social, and territorial integration, i.e., securing support from the EU structural fund and the integration funds. The political effects of Poland's integration into the EU were just as important as the economic ones. The list of political benefits received by Poland included increasing Poland's credibility in the international arena, a significant shift of Europe's political stability boundary to the east, securing the possibility of working in various institutions of the EU. This includes securing the possibility of actually participating in shaping a further chapter of the EU. Now is the last chapter to conclusion. In the first decade after joining the EU, Poland benefited not only economically, but also politically and socially. The free movement of goods, capital, services, and people enables Polish enterprises to develop and create many specific development opportunities. The strengthening competitiveness of made in Poland products has led to increased trade within the single European market, which in turn has led to significant trade surpluses with the EU partners. Since becoming a member of the EU, Poland's attractiveness for investment has increased significantly, and foreign capital has flowed in the form of foreign direct investment in Poland. Poland, a net beneficiary of the EU budget, received 70 billion euros in aid between 2007 and 2013. The structural funds and the cohesion fund received had to enable Poland to implement significant investment in transport infrastructure and environmental protection on a large scale. It is also used as a tool to promote medium and small-sized enterprises and has contributed to reducing the unemployment rate. EU funds has also given great impetus to the modernization of the agricultural sector and the development of rural areas. As a result of the free movement of workers gained with accession to the EU, the tendency of Poles to emigrate abroad has developed dramatically. Since becoming a member of the EU, the number of Poles residing abroad has increased significantly from 800,000 prior to accession to over 2.3 million in 2014. Meanwhile, joining the EU, also benefited Poland of a political nature. Poles are starting to act in various EU institutions, and it is very important that they participate in formulating EU policy and make decisions about the future of European integration. In this regard, the fact that on December 1st, 2014, former Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, was appointed to the President of the European Council for the first time as an Eastern European and served for 2.5 years until May 31st, 2017, symbolically shows that Poland's influence in the region has increased in the 10th year since joining the EU. Thanks.
Hello everyone, I am Sang-dong Lee, a full-time researcher at the EEBI. The topic I would like to present now is kids culture in Hungary, from fictitious subjectivity to cultural self-identity. The first thing that needs to be said about this topic is what kids is. Kids is a variable keyword that is hard to define dictionary-wise. Its appearance and interpretation changes depending on the angle of view. If you can see the text, please refer to footnote 1. Kitsch culture is a type of popular culture. In Hungary, kitsch culture emerged in the late 19th century and became increasingly popular in the early 20th century. In Hungary, kitsch culture was especially popular among the working class and peasants. For them, kitsch culture offered a way to escape the harsh realities of everyday life and provides a sense of community and belonging. Of course, kitsch culture was also popular among the bourgeois, but they saw it as a way to express their patriotism and loyalty to the Hungarian state. The period from the late 1950s to the early 1970s is considered the golden age of Hungarian kitsch culture. This was due to the rise of socialist realism. The official art style of the communist regime after World War II, socialist realism is characterized by realism and a focus on social themes, and the Hungarian communist regime used art as a means of propaganda, encouraging artists to create works that promote socialist ideas and values, such as collective farming and industrialization. As such, Hungarian kitsch art was often used to promote the ideology of the communist regime and glorify party leaders. Kitsch culture in Hungary began to decline after the fall of communism in 1989, as the country's political and social landscape changed. Hungary began to move away from Soviet influence, and the government became more open to Western ideas and culture. Kitsch culture became popular again in Hungary in the 2000s, partly because many Hungarians felt nostalgic for the communist era, and partly because kitsch culture provided a way to express individual and creativity in a society still in transition. In other words, Hungarian kitsch culture has been revived by a number of factors, including nostalgia, globalization, and Hungary's accession to the European Union. And it has continued to evolve and adapt to changing culture and social trends. One important aspect of kitsch culture during this time was the rise of nostalgia for the communist era. This growing nostalgia for the past has led to a renewed interest in the socialist era, including kitsch culture. Therefore, this article will explore the history and evolution of Hungarian kitsch culture and how it continues to shape Hungary's self-identity today, following Hungary's accession to the European Union. First, let's look at the time period called the Golden Age of Hungarian kitsch culture. From the late 1950s to the early 1970s, Hungary was under the influence of the Soviet Union. The Hungarian communist regime enjoyed relative stability and prosperity, and there was a renewed emphasis on traditional value and culture. The Hungarian communist regime used art as a means of propaganda, encouraging artists to create works that promoted socialist ideas and values, such as collective farming and industrialization. As such, Hungarian kitsch art was often used to promote the ideology of the communist regime and glorify party leaders. It was also used to create a sense of national pride and unity. Some of the most popular forms of kitsch art in Hungary during this time included paintings, sculptures, posters, and ceramics. These works often depicted scenes from everyday life in Hungary, such as workers in the fields, peasants in the villages, and children at play. Images of communist leaders, such as Matei, János Kádár, and Iryna, also frequently appeared. Not surprisingly, there was some critics. Those who saw it as a form of communist propaganda criticized it for its simplistic and unrealistic depiction of Hungarian life. Others saw it as a means for a communist regime to control the thoughts and feelings of the people. Despite the criticism, kitsch art was very popular in Hungary during the Golden Age. Kitsch art was a way for people to express their patriotism and loyalty to the regime. But it was also a way for them to cope with the hard realities under communism. Then, in the second period, after the 1989 regime change, the kitsch culture begins to decline in Hungary. It is important to recognize that several factors have contributed to the previous decline of kitsch culture in Hungary. There are roughly 5 factors to mention: a change in political climate, change in artistic focus, cultural homogenization, generational change, commercialization of kitsch. For more detailed explanation of these 5 factors, please refer to the text. Despite these factors, it's important to note that kitsch culture continues to have a place in Hungary's artistic landscape, with artists revisiting and reinterpreting kitsch elements through nostalgia, irony, or social commentary. Although kitsch culture is not as prominent as it was in its heyday, it remains an important aspect of Hungarian art and culture, reflect the country's complex history and continued interest in its past. The third period was after the European Union joined in the 2000s. In the 2000s, Hungarian kitsch culture experienced a resurgence influenced by a number of factors, including nostalgia, globalization, and Hungary's accession to the European Union. And it continued to evolve and adapt to changing cultural and social trends. Here are some aspects of Hungarian kitsch culture in the 2000s. Nostalgia. Kitsch culture in the 2000s was often nostalgic for the communist era. One important aspect of kitsch culture during this time was the rise of nostalgia for the communist era. Growing nostalgia for the past led to a renewed interest in the socialist era, including kitsch culture. As a result, people began to collect and appreciate the objects, memorabilia, and artwork from the era and associate it with their historical and cultural identity. This nostalgia was reflected in popular music, fashion, and design, which often featured retro elements such as Soviet-style hats, red star motifs, and hammer and sticker symbols. This was due in part to the fact that many Hungarians felt nostalgic for the communist era. And it was also due to the fact that kitsch culture offered a way to express their individuality and their creativity in society that was still in the process of transition. Satire. Kitsch culture in the 2000s was also often used to satirize the current political and social landscape. This was due in part to the fact that Hungary was undergoing a period of political and social change. And it was also due to the fact that kitsch culture offered a way to express dissent in a society that was still relatively repressive. Pop culture. Kitsch culture in the 2000s was also influenced by popular culture. This was due in part of the fact that Hungary was become more integrated into the global economy. And it was also due to the fact that kitsch culture offered a way to connect with a wider audience. Kitsch culture in the 2000s was a diverse and vibrant phenomenon. It was a way for Hungarians to express their individuality, their creativity, and their dissent. It was also a way for them to connect with their past and to satirize the present. Hungarian artists continue to engage with kitsch culture as a means of expressing political and social commentary. These artists use kitsch elements to explore topics such as national identity, consumerism, and the impact of globalization on Hungarian society. For more information on described aspects of Hungarian kitsch culture in the 2000s, see the text. In conclusion, what I'm trying to say is that about kitsch culture, some argue that it is a form of cultural appropriation and trivializing the communist past. Others argue that kitsch culture is just a way for Hungarians to make money and has no real cultural value. It's important to note that cultural trends are constantly changing and influenced by a variety of factors. When considered as a self-projection and an effort to find a cultural self-identity from a socio-economically shaped in a fictional subjectivity within a cultural environment and ecosystem. Hungarian kitsch culture is a way for Hungarians to express their national identity and come to terms with their communist past and have fun. Abraham Molo characterizes the modern era as the age of neo-kitsch. In the 19th century, it was called kitsch to pretend the fake was real. In the 21st century, it is called kitsch to pretend that real is fake. In this era, objects are no longer judged solely by their use, value, or basic functionality. Kitsch culture was massively and indiscriminately consumed by the public and lead to the emergence of art and design styles that were developed with new perspectives and changed the spirit of the times. Thank you.